Good morning, everyone. I'm Joshua Margolis. I'm a professor here in the Organizational Behavior Unit, and it's a pleasure to welcome you to the second panel in our summit. As you are about to hear, you will understand why I feel a distinct privilege to be moderating this session with three of our distinguished alumni. As you will soon hear, each of them has exemplified the mission of Harvard Business School. Each of them has exercised leadership that has made a difference in the world. And each of them has done so in the face of some extreme circumstances, which we refer to in this session as dealing with the unexpected. And in a few minutes, you'll hear from each of them about their experiences and about some of the lessons that they have drawn. This panel was put together with a simple but stark originating idea. Life happens. When students graduate from Harvard Business School and set out to pursue their aspirations and their plans and their highest imagined achievements, the unexpected unfolds in their lives and in their careers. But all too infrequent are the opportunities to acknowledge the unexpected, let alone to discuss the unexpected or to reflect upon it and share the lessons that we take away. And this session is designed to start a conversation about the unexpected as it arises in different shapes and forms in our lives, and what we can learn from one another about how to navigate the unexpected in our lives. Let me take a few minutes to introduce our three panelists and then to let you know how we hope to run today's session. So first, we'll hear from Lisa Carnoy, MBA 1994, Section A. I'm proud to say a section mate of mine and a friend. Lisa is the head of Global Capital Markets for Bank of America Merrill Lynch. She's a member of the Global Corporate and Investment Banking Operating Committee and the Capital Commitment Committee. She's also executive sponsor for the Women's Leadership Council in Global Banking and Markets. Lisa has worked in investment banking since receiving her BA from Columbia University. She worked for 3 investment banks before arriving here on campus to get her MBA. And she's now a trustee at Columbia, chairing the Alumni Affairs and Development Committee. She's a proud New Yorker, living on the Upper West Side with her husband David, a journalist, and their 4 children. Next, we will hear from Melissa Weiksnar, MBA 1982, Section B. Melissa is a writer, speaker, and advocate in the area of substance abuse prevention and treatment, and she teaches high school math. She's the author of a book about her daughter's struggle with drugs, about which you will hear in quite inspiring fashion in just a few minutes. Melissa attended Wellesley College and earned her bachelor's in economics from MIT, a master's in systems engineering from the University of Houston, and then worked for Conoco. After graduating with her MBA from Harvard, she worked at Hewlett-Packard and Apollo Computer, and in 1988, she founded Synernetics, a high-performance networking company that was later acquired by 3Com. She left high tech in 2000 and switched careers to teaching, and she's been quite active in the Harvard Business School Alumni Association of Boston. Third, we'll hear from Kathy Giusti, MBA 1985, Section A. Kathy is the founder and chief executive officer of the Multiple Myeloma Research Foundation and the Multiple Myeloma Research Consortium. She has more than 2 decades of experience in the pharmaceutical industry and previously held senior positions at GD Searle and at Merck. She's received many awards for her innovative leadership, most recently being named to the 2011 Time 100 list of the most influential people. She's received the Harvard Business School Alumni Achievement Award and the Healthcare Business Women's Association Woman of the Year Award. Her efforts have been featured on NBC, CBS, Fox News, and CNN, and her work has been profiled in the Wall Street Journal, the New Yorker, Harvard Business Review, The Economist, the New York Times, and Forbes, and Kathy currently serves on the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology. So beyond these impressive achievements, let me explain why we asked these 3 women if they would serve on this panel. The first is because of the range of unexpected challenges that they represent. What you will hear in their stories and their experiences reflects the range of unexpected challenges that our alumni encounter in their lives. Everything from the personal to the professional, from economic shocks to health crises, from the unexpected that grips our organizations and our careers to the unexpected that grips our families and our children. You will hear it represented in the stories, the experiences that they share. But perhaps more important, we asked these three women to serve on this panel because you will hear in their stories that the way they rose to these challenges, the way they rose to these unexpected events, holds lessons for all of us. So what we are going to do is we'll hear from each of them in succession. Lisa will share her experiences, then we'll hear from Melissa, and then from Kathy. They'll take about 10 minutes apiece to share their experiences and to distill a few lessons that they take away, and then we're hoping to open it up to discussion and to questions. With that, Lisa.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here and speak to you and with you on the unexpected. Just a couple things before I dive in. I'm going to speak about a professional challenge because that's what I was asked to speak about, but I certainly acknowledge that our lives are much bigger than what we do in our careers, and that no matter what challenge I faced professionally, it pales in comparison to anything that impacts your health, your family, or the broader world. So with that said, certainly the biggest professional challenge of my career was the end of Merrill Lynch and the financial crisis and our ultimate merger with Bank of America. And just to take you back to 2007, I had already been at Merrill Lynch for 15 years. I joined the firm out of business school, and I was very deliberate in choosing the firm. In fact, in somewhat of an old-fashioned way, I picked a firm that I planned to be at for a very, very long time, maybe 25 years or more. And I picked the firm largely because of the culture and the people and the spirit of entrepreneurship, and I absolutely loved it. Had a bright career to that point and was very devoted to my colleagues who were very much like my family as well. And they were with me in force when I got married. They were with me when my father passed away while I was a young associate. And really my role and my friendships at the firm were critical to my life. And so in the late part of 2007, I got a call from our president who said that he needed me to get involved in helping the company raise equity capital. And for those of you who are familiar with financial institutions, capital and liquidity are really the lifeblood of a financial institution. And that was really an alarm that something was not right and that we candidly were in trouble and the situation was potentially dire. And I felt an enormous weight. There was a small group of us working on this over the ensuing 9 months or so. We ended up doing our first deal over Christmas in 2007, and we did several other deals over the next several quarters. I felt enormous pressure. I was in a situation where it was very confidential, so I didn't even talk about it with my friends or my husband, even my partners at work. Some of the deals in and of themselves were a success, but every few months we would get another call that in fact we needed more capital, we needed to find more investors. And I really felt the weight of 40,000 jobs and the families and the related businesses that were connected to the firm. In September of 2008, there was an announcement over a very challenging weekend with the end of Lehman Brothers that Bank of America was going to merge or buy Merrill Lynch. And on the one hand, I was quite relieved because I knew it was a good thing to be part of a bigger and hopefully stronger institution, but also the challenges of a merger. And from a personal point of view, I didn't know if I had a job for 91 days. I was 7 and 8 months pregnant with twins at that point, so perhaps not an ideal time to be thinking about a job search. And I was also very focused on my team and what would happen in the integration. And what do you convey during a period of tremendous uncertainty in the broader markets as well as in this company as it was about to combine. And as you would now know, it's been 4+ years since the merger. Bank of America and Merrill Lynch merged on January 1st of 2009, and we're embarking on our 5th year. But from a business point of view, I think it's been a success, but certainly it has created many challenges. And so Joshua had asked us to share sort of what did we learn from this crisis or this unexpected challenge, and I would share 3 things. First, there's a famous Haitian proverb that speaks to mountains beyond mountains, that you get through something very difficult and there's something behind it that's equally difficult, another tall mountain. And this period felt very much like that. We would do a deal and think that we'd fortified the company, that we were in great shape and that we could get back to delivering for clients and doing deals and running the day-to-day. And yet, each quarter we ended up having yet another mountain or another desire for more capital. And it was very daunting. And what it made me realize is that you have to take things one day at a time to persevere, and that you do the best you can each day, and you'll get to the next challenge and continue going. And so not look at the big picture and get too daunted by what was ahead. Related to that, the second lesson that I learned in Jim Collins' book, Good to Great, he spoke about the Stockdale paradox. And for those of you who are not familiar, Admiral Stockdale was a POW in Vietnam for 8 years. And he spoke so eloquently about the fact that there were many other prisoners of war who frankly didn't make it. And those were by and large the people that said, I'll be home by Thanksgiving, or I'll be home by Christmas, I'll be home by my kid's birthday. And what Stockdale said is, you can't be focused on the near term, I'm going to get out of here. You just need to have confidence in the long term, that you'll prevail in the long term. And prevail may mean different things for different people. For me, it meant being part of a firm that was sustaining and strong, even thriving, and that I feel comfortable in the culture and could deliver for clients and colleagues. But really having that faith in the great long term, and particularly post the merger announcement and during the period of integration, I really thought about that, because I couldn't convey a clear picture on the near term, but I certainly could convey that over the long term things would get better. And then finally, and most importantly, compassion. To give a sense, at the time of the merger, I was managing a business that had 77 employees, and coincidentally, the Bank of America team that did the same part of the business was also 77 people, so 154. Post layoffs, we went all the way down to 79 people. And so that was really one of the hardest things I've ever been a part of. And you realize that no matter what, you need to treat people like the people they are, their brothers, their fathers, their sons, their mothers, their cousins, their neighbors, and treat them with dignity and respect. And the human element of that obviously goes well beyond the numbers. And so I think we've all been through a tremendous amount, and there were obviously layoffs even post that period. I hope we're through it now, but that is something that even a Harvard MBA and all of my experience to that point had not prepared me for. So with that, I'm going to pause, and we'll turn over to Melissa.
Thanks, Lisa. Thanks for coming, for having us. After graduating from HBS, I had a wonderful run in high tech. 6 years out, when I was 2 months pregnant with my third child, I co-founded the technology company, and our family also moved to a larger house 2 months before our second daughter was born. Amy arrived between our startup's fifth and sixth employees. New company, new house, new baby. It's amazing what you can do in your early 30s on 5 hours of sleep a night. And despite a stint of postpartum depression, which I never heard talked about at HBS, those years proved to be some of the most satisfying, creative, and foundation building of my life. Amy was 5 when my startup was acquired by 3Com, and 11 when I left high tech and then started teaching high school math full-time. I enrolled her at my school for what would be a 4-year roller coaster. Of our 3 kids, her personality was the most like mine, and parenting her was not easy. In addition to being incredibly bright, she was also extremely social, and I didn't have the street smarts to know all of what that meant, having spent most of my life as a nerd. As her behavior became more challenging, we had her tested, and she was diagnosed with depression, anxiety, low self-esteem, and later ADD. And despite starting counseling, she started cutting in 9th grade, using marijuana the summer before 10th, was already using cocaine as a sophomore, and first tried heroin at 17. I'll never forget the day she arrived at cross-country practice, high from smoking weed, and we had to meet with the principal. Then 2 hours later, I had to put on my best game face for the 5 classes worth of parents attending back to school night, most of whom had daughters on the cross-country team. There was no HBS to prepare me for that surreal evening. I found the prescription painkiller Vicodin in Amy's purse during junior year, having no idea how serious a signal that was. But when she had a positive tox screen for cocaine, I thought, I need an action plan. But I'm not sure my HBS approach was all that effective dealing with a progressive disease. We worked with a variety of professionals, but most were convinced that she was experimenting, and once she started college, her academics would prevail. I was heartened when she transferred from St. Louis University to Boston College's nursing program. But on November 16, 2009, I met with her and her drug counselor and learned that I was the mother of a heroin addict. But Amy wanted to go to treatment, but she would not be able to finish the first semester of her junior year. 6 days later, she began her week of detox, then 4 weeks of rehab. She moved to a residential treatment facility, and a few days later, snuck in drugs. She fatally overdosed on the day after Christmas, weeks shy of her 21st birthday. And this was her high school ring and her favorite necklace. And the facility did not have Narcan, the drug that can be sprayed up the nose to reverse an overdose. This could have saved my daughter's life. Nobody expected Amy to die. She was bright, beautiful, athletic, had a loving family, career goals, good health insurance, and so many wonderful friends. She even referred to me as a loving workaholic. I thought that as parents who abstained from illegal substances, we were well-educated role models, and that somehow our family might be immune. Wrong. In fact, one of my HBS colleagues came to Amy's wake and confided that their son was a recovering heroin addict. Shortly thereafter, we started a family support group for addiction, Conduit, through the HBS Association of Boston. At a time when conventional wisdom says not to make any major decisions, I decided that I needed to scale back my new job to half-time. Amy had been on my case to leave that position for several months. When she invited me to the Paul McCartney concert at Fenway Park the August before she died, I declined because we were in crunch season at work. But the school president would not accommodate my request to go half-time, and I resigned 2 months after Amy died. How cruel that my exit strategy ended up being my daughter's death. That door closing opened others. I was fortunate that I had the financial foundation to pause from the paid workforce. Most parents don't have that option. I could mother my then 24-year-old daughter, who was shattered at the loss of her little sister. I was conscious that just because my daughter died of an overdose did not mean I had to shift focus to work in that area. In fact, sometimes I longed to go back to a corporate cubicle where I could hide behind a screen if I was having a bad day. I began telling Amy's story. She left us the gift of the journals she wrote in rehab, which I published last summer. When Amy died, several people said, "You should start a foundation." But having done a startup, I knew how much work that is and would be, and I've rather spent my time trying to figure out who is already heading up effective efforts and where I might join forces. I've been writing, speaking, and advocating, especially for Narcan. Knowing that feels right to me, and when it no longer makes sense, I'll stop. I don't have to tell you that every individual deals with every unexpected situation differently. But in going through a parent's worst nightmare, I realized that I could just as easily be curled up in bed, still unable to function. So I don't think of myself as a role model. I can just speak to my experience to date. I was buoyed by the friendships I'd maintained, high school classmates, my Saturday running group, the HBSAB programs committee, my former students, all of whom knew Amy, my corporate colleagues. In fact, the friendships I'd formed in the workplace, much like Lisa, have remained among the strongest. One colleague wrote the original music to the lyrics I created out of Amy's journals, and another recorded the audiobook in her studio. My HBS training also makes me increasingly concerned about the business community coming to grips with the enormity of this epidemic and its threat to our nation's security and economic competitiveness, and how some of our best business minds market a toxic culture to our children, including the synthetic marijuana and candy-like tobacco products you can buy at a convenience store. The cost and opportunity costs of the epidemic in healthcare, criminal justice system, and productivity are staggering. Consider the case of the storage company in Ohio having trouble finding enough job candidates who can pass a drug test. Or the company whose purchasing manager was buying extra coffee and electronics, then selling them on eBay, raising $100,000 to support his painkiller addiction. After Amy died, former colleagues opened up with their stories that we'd never talked about. The CEO who had to send their kid to a wilderness program because of substance abuse and attempted suicide. The designer now raising her granddaughters because her daughter killed herself after years of battling alcohol and drugs. The top manager functioning with several heroin-addicted siblings. The marketing guru who hid his cocaine addiction from his parents for over a decade. I could go on and on. I'm still learning about the complexities of this scourge, from the geopolitical to the heart of families. I'm still figuring out where I can uniquely add value. I feel like this time of my life should be the most integrative period to make a positive difference. Currently, I'm teaching high school math. The wonderful school where Amy went wanted me back part-time and would love to have me back full-time. But I'm finishing a second book, this one for teens and young adults, which is a transcription of Amy's adolescent journals. I continue to attend Naranon family group meetings and tell Amy's story to students, parents, educators, and clinicians. And I talk individually with neighbors and strangers and alums who seek me out. I was humbled to realize that I was powerless over my daughter's disease, but I also felt really let down by so many of the professionals I dealt with. I have to cut myself the slack to know that I did the best I could with what I knew at the time. But I was clueless about so much, especially how expensive synthetic heroin, i.e. prescription painkillers, are today's gateway to cheap, illegal heroin. And that's why I'm passionate about sharing Amy's story, and will be happy to share more of what I've learned during the Q&A or after the session. Thank you.
Thanks, Melissa. So far you've heard a little bit about challenges on the career side, and then of course challenges, family and social, and my job was just to help you to understand what happens when you face a challenge yourself and it becomes a bit of a health issue, because it definitely does have impact on your family and your job and what you end up doing with all of that. So I thought I would just share my story with you, help you to understand how I overcame some of those obstacles, and then give you 3 key takeaways that I had from the journey. So to walk you through my story, I have to take you back a ways to when I was 37 years old. And I will never really forget this time. It was actually Christmas time, and I was putting up our tree with my husband, Paul, who was an HBS classmate. And we were literally putting this tree up, and I remember looking at him and going, oh my gosh, we really are doing so great. Like, we just bought this beautiful home. We had a little 1-year-old girl wandering around with us, and we both absolutely loved our jobs. And by the time we took that tree down and we're packing all the ornaments up, I didn't know whether I would ever be taking that box out of the attic again. I had been diagnosed with cancer. It's called multiple myeloma. When I was diagnosed, it was 100% fatal. Nobody had ever lived more than 3 years with the disease. And I can tell you at that point, everything that I was doing just stopped. You just stop everything. You don't talk to your boss. You don't even think about going into work. You're just going, I don't know what just happened to my life. But clearly I'm still sitting here, and I'm 54 years old, so some good things happened through all of this. And to walk you through the story, I have to help you to understand where I went personally and then where I also went professionally. Personally, I think I was incredibly lucky because at a time like that, when you've been told, and they look you in the eye and say you are going to die, get your life in order and get your will written and get close to your family, you either pull the covers up over your head or you decide you're going to fight. And I was really lucky to have this little girl that was running into my bedroom every morning with this big smile on her face, and it never even dawned on me that I would do anything except fight to live longer, to be with her. Since she was 1 at the time, I kept thinking, I'll probably be gone by the time she turns 4. So I thought if I could just extend my life till she's 5, I had heard that that's when children really start to remember their mom. And that was my vision. My vision was that simple. It was a new vision in my life. I was just going to do whatever I could to have this little one remember me. And that was good enough. The second thing I did personally was I lived in small increments. And again, I had no choice because I was going to the doctors, and every month they would draw my blood. And if it was holding, the cancer protein was holding, it meant I got a reprieve for another month. And if it didn't, that meant that I was going to be going in for a bone marrow transplant. And, I might make it, I might not make it. But again, when you have a little one, it's so amazing what you see in a month. Like, all of a sudden it was a new tooth or a new word. And like I said, oh my goodness, that was like another great milestone. So living in these little windows was okay by me. And then the third thing I realized is when you live with a death sentence, you take risk. And so at the same time that I was interviewing all of my oncologists, I really wanted her to have a buddy. I'd always planned on having more than one children. I am an identical twin. I always had a sidekick. And I just decided, you know what, I know it's crazy. The doctors thought I was nuts, but I decided to go through in vitro and go through several in vitros and see if I could pull it off and give her a sibling. And if that was the last thing I did, again, that was like a home run. And so my life was going on like this. And while all of that was happening, the insurance was also through me. And so I had 300 people reporting to me, and I do remember the madness of it all, trying to get the shots through the in vitro and standing in lines and then running to meetings where it was 200 people and then running to the oncologist and trying to figure out a plan. But you know what? You just keep moving. Like these, just one step at a time, you keep moving. So my personal life was moving along in that direction. And then simultaneously, again, I think you get back to the relationships and the people that love you. I did have to walk away from my job running worldwide operations for a major pharmaceutical company where my dream was to be the first woman president at Merrill. And I knew I had to walk away. But the company was great, and I have to say, everybody around me that had worked with me at Merck or Searle, at all the agencies, all reached out, and they were trying to send money and checks and saying, let's at least get research into this really uncommon disease and see if we can help you. And that became the start of the Multiple Myeloma Research Foundation, where these amazing relationships lifting me. And I can't tell you, the friends from HBS, my husband's classmates and mine, were really the start of our foundation. And so I started saying, okay, let me see if I can have a vision of bringing scientists into this uncommon disease and jumpstart what we needed to get things going. And again, working in short-term increments, because I didn't think I would ever live long enough to run a major foundation. My short-term increments were, well, let's get the scientists in. Okay, let's build a tissue bank. Okay, let's build a clinical network and do phase 1 and 2 trials. Okay, now we'll do genomic sequencing. Oh, you know what, now I see another obstacle. Let's force everybody to give up intellectual property and put all of their tools out into the public domain because nobody's doing that. And here it is, years later, multiple myeloma as a cancer has seen more drugs approved by FDA than any other cancer in the country. We have become the absolute gold standard in how you run a nonprofit. And my life is really speaking on the road and working with other amazing leaders of cystic fibrosis or Michael J. Fox, where we are changing not only cancer, but the entire nonprofit sector. And again, I think we ended up doing that with this tremendous sense of urgency, I think, because, you're always trying to save people's lives. And when you're talking to patients that are all dying, it's not just myeloma, it's pancreatic cancer and liver cancer. You do live your life with a lot of urgency, and you do take a lot of risk, because I really have nothing to lose. People would say to me, oh my God, Kathy, the Mayo Clinic is going to be so mad at you, or Dana-Farber is going to get so upset because you're breaking the mold of how academic centers do research. And I kind of look at it and said, as long as we're professional, it's okay. Like, we have to break the mold. Somebody's got to break the mold. The way we do cancer research today is so unbelievably broken and archaic that somebody has to take a stand on it on behalf of patients. So I now can look at my life and say, where did I land? Can I look back now and say, have we done things well? And I have to say I've been incredibly lucky. Yes, I did have to go through a grueling bone marrow transplant with my sister, and I wouldn't wish that on anybody, but I have been on every drug that our foundation has released. And while I am personally grateful for that, I'm more grateful for the fact that we've literally saved tens of thousands of patients' lives with these therapies. I had been married to that same Harvard classmate for 25 years, and I took that survey and everything that I could have said of marrying well, I'll tell you, it was at least 50% of the game for me. I could not have asked for a better partner in my life. My daughter, Nicole, that little 1-year-old girl, is now a freshman at Boston College, and a business major who I think wants to follow in her mom's footsteps, which is just amazing to me. And yes, she does have a sidekick, her little brother, who's a sophomore in high school, and I found out last night he pitched his first no-hitter in high school. I missed it. But you know what? It's all still good because, he knows I never miss his games. And, they really do know why I'm here. And I think at the end of the day, I can look back at my life and say, okay, I didn't become the first woman president of a pharmaceutical company. I kind of wish that I had. But at the end of the day, I say, you know what? 1 in 2 of us will be diagnosed with cancer, and 1 in 3 of us will die. And if I can look back on my life and say that I made it better for anybody and everybody that has to deal with these devastating diseases, I say thank goodness. So what do I want to share with you? I think the 3 things that I want to share with you are, number 1, you can look at your life and it's all about happiness. I had to reset the vision of my life. It went from this beautiful house outside of Chicago and, having, several children and being the president to, you know what, I'm going to take a different path now. It's going to be, hoping my daughter, I get to see her to kindergarten and then, keep moving. And it's okay to set a new vision for your life. I think the best thing I ever did, and I say having cancer, you have an excuse to go sit down with your husband and talk to counselors, because I certainly wasn't going to leave him with the mess of, I'd like to have another child, and by the way, I'm going to die, so I'm going to leave you with that. I mean, everything we did with a plan and help and support and trying to help us to understand, well, if we do this, then we should move, and we should move to where our family is, and that means you're selling your company. And if we sell your company, there were so many other pieces, but trying to figure it out together and getting help to figure that out was the best thing that we ever did. I think the second piece, and Lisa talked about this too, is you don't have to transform your entire life. Sometimes it's making the small adjustments. Like I said, a month at a time was how I was living. And you'd be amazed at the small things you can do that you say, you know what, I actually feel happier now. I really feel like my life is in a better place right now. And it's okay to make those small changes and then celebrate them, because you really do want to celebrate the moments that you get. And the third thing I say to everybody is don't wait for a crisis. I mean, I think the 3 of us are really the example of that. Don't wait for a crisis in your life to make it better. Take that chance and do something today that's going to make your life better, because the rest of your life is not promised to you in any way. And the last piece that we were asked to speak on is, did Harvard prepare you in some ways for this? And I can tell you Harvard completely prepared me for this. And the reason for that is I came to Harvard never having taken a business class. I was a pre-med major accepted to medical school who decided to take a shift. All I knew was about the Krebs cycle and biology. I didn't know any. When people gave me the cases, I was like, oh my God. And I will tell you, first year I was going to leave. I couldn't believe I was here. I was surrounded by all these business people, and Ben Shapiro sat down with me and said, you know what, you've got a great technology background. We kill to have people that know science like you know science. Please stay. We are here to help you. And I did stay, and I was forever grateful for the support that Harvard gave me. I was grateful for Harvard taking me out of my comfort zone, because I'm always outside my comfort zone today. I'm always duking it out with academic centers or biotech firms or different people. And you know what? I'm okay with that. I really am. And I think third is the network that Harvard has built for me. I know for some people they say, I don't really hear from Harvard unless I'm getting, a request for funding. My life with Harvard has not been like that at all. In the last 6 months, I've been back up here on their healthcare board. I did a program with them that was Harvard Business School matched with Harvard Medical School. I come back up in May where we're doing a program with Bill Salmon and Richard Hammermesh on how do you do deal structures when you're doing venture philanthropy, and it's cystic fibrosis, and we bring everybody back together and we do our own case studies, but that was an idea we brought to them. I don't think we should, wait all the time to say, well, what's the faculty doing for me? Sometimes if you've got a great idea, they'll jump on it, and now we've made that into an annual program. We write white papers, we're doing more case studies around it, and I have to say, it's been amazingly joyful. So I have nothing but good things to say. I think also, marrying you're the best guy I could marry that just happened to be here. I think that's also made my life unbelievably good as well.
Thank you all. Before we open it for questions, I'd like to ask you all one starting question, which is, what might HBS do to equip our students, the next generation of students, to handle the unexpected in their lives? Are there any things that you'd suggest that we think about doing here at the school to prepare our students as they go out to live their lives?
I think a lot of our cases just are business as usual, and the crises are all business crises. But in fact, it's the personal crises that are going to be keeping yourself, your employees, awake at night. And I think a big problem is just having the introduction, having the language to talk about these things. So cases that talk about something that goes below the surface. So you can understand, well, gee, the CEO is trying to do a merger, and at the same time, their daughter has an eating disorder, so, it's supposed to fly here, but they've got to take their daughter to treatment. Something about, the reality of depression in the workforce, and even, within the MBA program, getting the culture of the sections to be more sensitive to, gee, what do I look for to see if a classmate may be at risk? How do I talk about this? Where are the resources? So just being able to start the conversations, I think, would be a huge step.
Yeah, I think the case studies can be, incredibly helpful. And some of them can talk about, why people landed where they landed, and it is always interesting. There are a lot of great alum. I listen to Lisa talk and I go, how does she have four children? So we end up, there are situations where, Lisa didn't end up talking about that, but it's probably a really interesting dynamic of how do you pull those things off. We have another classmate, Katie Hood, who was running Michael J. Fox. She had to stop because she did have a child that was having issues. Now she's on child number 4 and she's, teaching at Duke. I think sometimes the way you watch how people move around and do case studies like that, and I think the other thing to say about that is it's okay. The reason that people end up in different jobs, we shouldn't judge. And it was funny, when we were doing the case study yesterday, there was somebody who said, yeah, but all the women end up in nonprofit or education, as if that was a bad thing. Well, you know what? I didn't mean to go to the nonprofit sector, and 10 years ago it was horrible. I didn't think they were run well at all, but it's not such a bad place to go now because some people are changing it. And I don't think, if you move into different careers, there's a lot of good reason for it. If you're leading and you're running things and you're changing the world, there's nothing wrong with that. And when I talk to people like Lisa, I think it's fascinating to find out how does she pull it off. And I think the answers you were giving yesterday, which are self-deprecating, we have to laugh about it. We shouldn't judge. We should just laugh. And if you're happy, you're happy.
Maybe you need a course like this, right, on life happens and resilience. And I guess what I've been struck with is, for me, HBS was very much about confidence and conviction, right? Having a direct answer on a case, yes, no, support, or don't, never in doubt. And that's not really real life. And so it's juxtaposing this confidence with also humility, that as powerful as we are, as influential we are, as successful as we are, we're actually powerless when things like this happen. And how do you do the best you can? And how do you survive, ideally thrive, persevere, endure, and get better? And so maybe a bit more on that.
And I'd also like to add to that, at my 30th reunion, one of the most financially successful people in our class spoke about some of his personal issues. You know, a daughter with eating disorders. He and his wife ended up founding a center because they couldn't find any place for children with eating disorders. And he also told this gut-wrenching story about, you know, discovering that their third child, you know, had this issue. The doctors wanted to abort. They said, no way, we have to go through this. So to have cases with male protagonists as well who are dealing with these issues, just to raise the consciousness among everybody that, you know, it's not just the women who are dealing with the family and personal stuff, it's the dads too.
Thank you. With that, I'd like to open it up for others either to reflect upon what you heard, ask questions, or share your own experiences and lessons.
Just a very simple question. Sometimes when you're dealing with the unexpected, I think say in your case you didn't know a lot about addiction treatments, etc. How do you know, what was your path to learning more about it? Because it feels so daunting, and I know there's Google, and I know there's the internet, and there's tons and tons and tons of information. It's tough to read through it all. It's tough to know, you know, for every article you read that says go left, you find another article that says go right. So what was your path to kind of really learning about whatever issue you were facing? Because Lisa, I don't know, maybe it didn't apply to you as much, but, you know, in your personal lives, how did you get to be a master of what you learned? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think at the time that Amy was sick, we trusted professionals, but didn't know to ask the question, are you a professional in this area? So someone would say, oh, she's a really great psychologist. We never knew to ask the question, but does she know how to deal with kids who have conduct disorder and substance abuse? Much like, you know, Kathy wouldn't have gone to a kidney specialist. Right. You know, you have to find the people who, you know, are trained, and, you know, even if she did go to a cancer specialist, doesn't necessarily mean they were great in their field. So, you know, you've got that double discernment to do. Someone who is specialized and then within the specialty really knows what they're doing. But quite frankly, it wasn't until after Amy died and I continued to go to my family support groups, the Naranon groups, that I've continued to learn about the disease and what families go through and hearing the stories. Because, you know, quite frankly, coming from HBS, I thought, oh, you know, an Al-Anon meeting, you know, that's not for me. And boy, was I, to Lisa's point, boy, was I humbled. I have gotten so much out of those family support groups. So, you know, don't be afraid to be around people who don't have HBS degrees, because in the end, you know, these diseases don't care what your degree is or anything else.
But the skills you learn here, they do teach you how to do well in other things. So, I mean, it's very true. You know, there wasn't a lot written about multiple myeloma, but you do learn that you've got to do your own research, that you've got to talk to everybody. And there's a certain element of, you know, I didn't sit down and trust the first doctors I met. I literally went and again, we had the resources, but to go see 4 or 5 and try to figure it out. And it did put me on the right path. I think when I decided that I would start a foundation, again, it was, you know, I had been taught benchmark. I mean, I just picked, you know, and did my research and picked the top 5 I could find, and I went and met them. I just went out and met them, and I said, how did you get started? What did you do? And then when I went to put my board together, that was about trust, and I ended up putting several, you know, Harvard MBAs on it. The chairman of my board is still a section mate of mine. He's the most awesome chairman. And I sit on public boards. The guy's amazing. And so I'm incredibly lucky to have those kinds of resources and still use them.
I'm interested in the question of what's covered in cases and what, I mean, every session I've been in, people have said, we need cases where men make some of these decisions, and maybe things have changed. My recollection was that it was only in entrepreneurship. Was there a case in which, my recollection, he started all on his credit cards, and his wife is freaked out when she starts getting the phone calls. And that was the tiniest little window into the reality of how your work problems leak into your life. and presumably in response. So please tell me things have changed since 1983.
So I think things have changed, probably not as much as you would ideally like or as much as they should ideally be at this point. One of the reasons why I was excited to moderate this panel is because there's a second-year course that I'm beginning to develop called 10 Decisions. That will be its name. And the idea is in part to look at the types of crucial decisions that our alumni face and how they navigate through them. So that we can, before students graduate, expose them to what life really looks like, both in their professional context and their personal context. But perhaps the most memorable single class session that our first year students go through, if you ask them at the end of the first year or you ask them at the end of the second year, is a session in the Leadership and Organizational Behavior course called Alumni Profiles, where what we've done is taken Tom DeLong and Leslie Perlow, took 5 profiles written, I think, by the class of 1976 at their 20th reunion, and disguise the names, and then they're shared with students. And basically, these are 5 representative profiles of how the twists and turns of lives, and it's men and women alike. And we ask, in conjunction with that, we ask students to imagine to write their own profile looking back 20 years, what they imagine it would be like. And what they tend to experience is a discontinuity between a fairly pristine and idealistic vision that they set out looking back 20 years and what they discover the reality looks like. And we have a fairly rich discussion. Is that enough? Is that all we should be doing? Certainly not. And one of the things I heard both in the discussion yesterday when this panel was run and in the case discussion was that we need more cases that bring life in together with the typical business challenges.
These courses sound great. We've missed them all. Will any of them be put on the internet so people can take the course without being a student?
So Dean Noria, who's an innovator and made inclusion one of his top initiatives, is right now, Young Mi Moon is leading an initiative at the school to figure out what our digital presence will be. So we're a few years away, but we are working on it in conjunction with the university's effort around edX. So our hope is in good time, we would hope to do so. Barb.
So I have a similar situation to Melissa, but my child has, thank God, been the 1/10 of 1% that has survived this and turned around the heroin addiction. But you're not prepared for this because you think that you're prepared for anything and you can handle anything. And the number of people that, when I start talking about it, come out of the woodwork and have similar problems and they don't come to you. I mean, they don't, you don't realize that there are so many other people going through the same thing or something similar, and we think we can handle it ourselves. And the resources you need are finding other people that are going through similar things that you can talk to about this. And it's not something that's taught you. You don't ask for help here. You figure it out on your own. You're taught decision making and driving and getting data, and you can do all that, and it's not going to help when you're sitting there, what do I do with my own child, or what do I do with a spouse or something like that. So I think that in terms of the education and what you need to bring into this is to get people to understand that when this happens, because it will, I cannot tell you how many people have somebody in their family dealing with addiction somewhere. It floored me, just floored me. What kind of response do you have? Where can you get help? It's okay to ask for help. There's no shame here. I mean, it's not what we're taught here. And it's just, or whether you get sick yourself. I mean, you came out of the closet with an illness. How many people are dealing with an illness and we know nothing about it? No one ever hears about it because we're trying to deal with it ourselves because we're taught that, and we're all type A personalities and that's what we do. And you're not in control.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. Yesterday I was sitting at dinner and with people from like my year, I'm class of 2008 and some people from 2007. I was talking to some girls from my class and really excited because we have our 5th year reunion coming up. And I'm like, so, when are you guys getting in town for the reunion? And none of them had planned to go to the reunion. And I don't know if I'm just someone who likes reunions and like being around people, but I was really struck by that. And they all said, well, we don't feel like we're really successful enough. We don't have anything to talk about. They hadn't submitted anything to the reunion book. And I was like shocked. And I'm like, the reality is we all have these experiences where we start growing up and we have life. Like no one is going to be until like someone's still struggling with something at work, someone has personal problems, but something about this environment where people feel like they can't share. And I remember with someone else, we were talking about an article in the Harvest when we were in school. Apparently, something like 60 or 70% of people are depressed when they're on this campus, but no one talks about it. Apparently, everyone might go to seek help individually and talk to someone individually, but no one ever talks about it. So you're all sitting in this classroom, you know, somewhat aggressive, trying to get into the conversation, trying to seem like nothing's absolutely wrong and we're all perfect, but everyone has problems and no one's talking about it with each other. We might talk about it with people outside of this environment, but I don't know if it's pride, I don't know what it is, but it's fascinating that it prevents us from sharing, you know, and I've been so struck by the stories that all of you have shared, and it reminded me of something like, I grew up Catholic, I'm still not a religious person, but someone had me watching Joel Osteen recently, and he had this whole sermon about letting your test be your testimony and embracing the things that happen to you in life, and it helps people to, you know, overcome their challenges. And so I was really struck in just thinking, as I was sitting here, like, you women have let your test be your testimony and made amazing stories to share with other people so they could come out of it. But somehow, I don't know if it's the gravity of the experience needs to be so big that we sort of let go of the pride that we often feel sometimes. But it's more of a comment than a question, right?
Can I just say something on that? Because I've been, Boston area has a HBS Women's Association, and so I've been president of that, I've been president of the Alumni Association in Boston also. And for 10 years, I've been watching the women that have kids and don't know how to integrate back into the system. So I know there's been a huge amount of work on it, which is wonderful, just bringing it out in the open. But that whole issue of women staying home, and now they're not climbing the corporate ladder, and so they don't come to reunions, and they don't talk to other alumni, and when they come to some of the Women's Association meetings, and they feel like failures. And there's a major problem with what is the definition of success coming out of this university, and especially for women, because we're still dealing with, we're the ones who have the kids. And as the research showed yesterday, you know, the men are helping, but they're not the ones staying home, or they're not the ones getting the first phone call when the kid's sick at school. And so none of that's changed. I cannot believe, and I'm class of 81, and it hasn't changed. And I mean, I worked for 10 years, and then I had kids. No one on that playground knew I had a Harvard MBA. I mean, it wasn't something you talked about. But I remember coming back, I was married when I was here, and I was the only woman in my section who was married. There were other women, but none of them were married. Maybe one other was. And I had kids right away, and my 5th reunion, I was dealing with diapers and potty training, and everyone's climbing the corporate ladder. And in my 10th reunion, they were all talking diapers and potty training, and I was starting my own business. And at 15, we finally caught up. And now they're leaving corporate America in droves at 15 years. But people, you know, that whole definition of success, especially for women, it's a problem.
Actually, Barbara, you're bringing up a very interesting point, because I'm class of 87, and at my 25th reunion, it was very clear that the guys all talk to each other all the time, and the women don't. And there's something about we fragment because we're making different choices at different time, and we lose the connections in between. And I really thought about it a lot even as we were looking at those survey results, that everyone, you know, your cohort's your class to some extent, right? But your class is all going in different directions. And when you have kids, usually your cohort are the people with the kids the same age, right, in the same place. But there have been very limited ways for alumnae to connect. And then there was just one other thing I want to mention, which is the HBS alumni forums are, I've been in one for about 8 months, and it's been the most spectacular, authentic forum to discuss personal, family, and career issues in a way that is very committed. And the men in it are more emotionally available and aware than I have ever seen anywhere, because it's a safe environment. And to me, I was thinking, well, I think I'm going to have more unexpected stuff in my life, and I needed a group of people that I thought that I could rely on to ask, you know, questions about whether it was a career issue or a family issue. And it's been a really remarkable opportunity that HBS kind of has under our umbrella.
We're at the end of our time, and I've been instructed to make sure we stay on time. And I'm going to ask you to do one last thing before you leave this room, but first I want to thank our panelists for sharing their experience. Actually picking up on a couple of these comments and what we heard a lot yesterday, which is the importance of building relationships and connections. So before you leave this room, what I'd ask you to do is to turn around to 2 or 3 people you don't know and make sure you introduce yourself and a little bit about yourself so you create a new connection before you leave this session. And thank you all.